Yeah, so we start with the next presenter, Ragnar. Ragnar is Pipedrive employee. He is Senior DevOPS Engineer, and he will be talking about our development environment. It's really cool. A bit more applause.
Hello to everyone. It's so nice to see so many people here this evening after a very long COVID-19 break. It's an honor. So my name is Ragnar Paide. I am from Pipedrive, as Michaela said, and I am here to give a talk about our development environments and platforms in Pipedrive. So I'm going to walk you through our journey from local development environment to the remote one. But before we start with the topic, I'm going to introduce a bit more myself. Many years back, I started my day job as a full-stack developer. I did it for 2 years, and then I realized that front-end development isn't exactly for me. Then I moved on with databases because I like databases a lot. I did some time database administration, and at the same time, I also focused on automation and tooling, and eventually ended up doing, again, backend service development. In 2019, I joined Pipedrive, DevOps Engineering tribe, and today, this meetup event is my very first meetup event as a speaker. It's a big honor. Thank you. So the agenda for my presentation is as follows. First, we are going to give a bit context to my presentation. Then I'm going to cover the background of the involvement of Pipedrive's development environments from the beginning until today, basically. Then we are going to focus on the local development environment that is currently used in Pipedrive. We are also going to talk about the developer experience of our local development environment. Then after that, we are going to focus on the remote development environment, the main topic of my talk today. And then I'm going to share some additional resources about how you can actually find more information about our development environments. And at the very end, we are going to talk about practical tips based on our experience with development environments. And at the very end, there will be the questions and answers section. So the context, why are we here today? Why am I giving this talk today? So past 2 years, let's say, we have been working heavily on our development environment. We have been working heavily on improving that. And during the work, we have learned quite a bit of things, and we have gone through the learnings and lessons, and we want to share that information with you. Perhaps this is somehow useful for you. We also want to share our success story because where we are today, we consider as a success. And at the very end of this presentation, I'm going to give you some practical tips as well if you are considering removing from a local development environment to the remote one. And of course, pizzas and drinks. Technology stack, for the context, is, if you talk about development environments, Docker Desktop. I hope you all know what Docker Desktop is, or if you don't, then you can go and check it online. We also have many workstations for developers here in Pipedrive, different flavors. We have MacBooks, we have Linux workstation, we have Windows workstations for development. And if you talk about remote development environment, then we are using Kubernetes in AWS, and most of Pipedrive's services are written in JavaScript or TypeScript and run in Node.js runtime environment. And also some of the services are developed in Go. So this is the context for development environment. Before we proceed, I would like to ask you a question. How many of you use Docker Desktop in your development processes? I see quite many hands. Nice. Then you know what I am talking about. And then the next question, how many of you deploy your services on Kubernetes? Again, quite a few, not that many as I saw hands for the previous question, but still, some of you know it. So, Pipedrive was founded in 2010, and in the beginning it was all about one monolith service in one repository, the Pipedrive application. Developers worked on it without any kind of framework, basically. They did their changes. They started the application locally on their workstation. They tested it, and they debugged it. After a while, after a few years, they realized that they can't actually continue like this because Pipedrive grew. There were more and more developers, and they couldn't continue on one monolith service only. They had to split it up into microservices, and the development environment got a lot more complex with that, and some sort of framework was needed to handle that kind of complexity. So Vagrant-based development environment was introduced, and at some point in time when Docker desktop was released, then also this technology was brought in. And in 2017, Vagrant was basically dropped from the development environment, and our local development environment was fully built on Docker desktop, and the solution was called Docker Workstation. In June 2020, when we moved, actually the move started already before, when we moved from Docker Swarm into Kubernetes, we also decided to bring our local development environment closer to the Kubernetes technology. And in June 2020, we released Kubernetes Workstation, aka KWS. So these were the local development environments. And in November 2021, last year, we released remote development environment. We actually learned quite a bit from the local development environments and then decided to move on to the remote development environment as well. And the solution is called the DevBoxes. So if I say local development environment, then it really means that everything happens locally on your workstation. So you code on your workstation, you run your stuff on your workstation, everything is basically local. If I say remote development environment, then some things happen actually in a remote machine. The only thing that you do on your workstation in case of remote development environment is the coding, changing the code file, source code, and running your integrated development environment, your code editor. And once you are done with your changes, then you start your service, but not on your workstation, but on a remote machine. So this is the remote development environment. And while you are making changes to your source code in a remote development environment, then these changes get automatically synced into a remote machine. The service restarts, and you will see your changes immediately. Okay, now to the local development environment. So the work for local development environment with Kubernetes started in March 2020, and after 2 months, in June 2020, we released the first version of it. The feedback was very positive, and the feedback was very positive. It was very welcomed because it was closer to Kubernetes, but still some things didn't really go as we actually would want it to. But nevertheless, the thing was delivered, and it provided a local development environment in Kubernetes. So it was basically a command line application written in JavaScript, running in Node.js runtime environment, and delivered as a NPM package. With this product, we also introduced Helm into our stack. So if we have here Kubernetes people, then they most probably also know what Helm is. Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes, basically, for packaging your microservices and deploying them on Kubernetes clusters. The solution also included built-in support for functional tests. It also supported built-in. It also supported stacks, group of services, basically, some sort of dependency management. So if you wanted to develop your microservice, but that microservice depended on other microservices, then you could basically deploy those other microservices with one single command as a stack. All the configuration files for local development environment were in the services Git repository. So nothing was in a shared repository or something like that. So all the configuration was next to your microservice code. The solution ran almost in full isolation. So there were no cross-usage of microservices between different developers if they used the environment, except the databases and then messaging services. And there was one big change also with this project in Pipedrive. So first time in Pipedrive's history, there was one single team behind that product. So previously, all the other local development environments were based on community support. So different engineers from different teams supporting the development environment. But this time, we decided to change it and put one single team behind it. So this is the interface of local development environment. This is still used today. So the basic flow, if you want to start using local development environment today in Pipedrive, is that you first run KWS init, then you change your current working directory to your microservice repository, to the root, and then you just run KWS service development, and magic starts to happen. What was the developer experience like after we released our local development environment in Kubernetes? So first, we discovered that the performance is actually quite good. Docker for Mac, for example, had big issues with CPU usage, and it hit us as much as well. So our developers were complaining all the time, basically. The other thing that bothered us was the limited amount of resources on local workstations. So we have different specs with our workstations. And sometimes it happened that there was not enough CPU and memory resources for running your services on your local workstation. Also, depending on the amount of services that you wanted to run on your workstation, it happened that sometimes the startup was really, really slow. The other thing that we hit was that some of the developers actually experienced some issues that were not reproducible on other workstations, and it made it really, really difficult to debug and troubleshoot the issues. We didn't really understand what is the problem because we couldn't reproduce them. We also had observability issues. We didn't really understand what is the developer experience with the local development environment. But this is like really, really crucial to understand in order to approve. So we had observability issues as well. Another thing that hit us was the amount of dependencies that KWS required. So KWS is a command line application, but it actually depended on a lot of tools that needed to be installed in order to KWS to function. So having different workstations like MacBooks, Linux machines, Windows machines. So handling all those different specs was really, really, really difficult for us. And one interesting thing that we also discovered was that our developers, or some of them at least, were not very eager to update their development tools. So we were constantly fixing issues in KWS, but for some reason, we still saw developers complaining that something doesn't work, although it already had been fixed in the very latest release. So our developers, or at least some of them, didn't really want to upgrade their tooling. And what was the impact or what is the impact of all those issues, or all these issues in front of us, is the impact to the deployment frequency, developer productivity, and developer happiness. So our developers want to have robust tools for developing their microservices, and if they don't have it, then their productivity drops, and also their happiness drops. So in order to actually increase the productivity and the happiness, then we need to fix our problems in our development environments. So all these issues and lessons learned from the local development environment, we decided to actually take a next step and introduce remote development environment. Together with KWS in June 2020, we also released a proof of concept of remote development environment. Although it was a bit clunky, it still received some positive feedback. And after learning the lessons with our local development environment, we decided to introduce developer experience product manager role in our company. And that manager took the experience of that proof of concept remote development environment and decided to turn that into a real product. So the work or the planning actually started in summer 2021. The implementation began in September 2021, last year. And first alpha release was introduced to our alpha testers in November 2021. And today, all the Pipedrivers can actually already use it since January this year. So what is remote development environment in today's context in Pipedrive? It's again a command line application that interacts with a remote Kubernetes cluster and with several other services as well. And that's the interface for the remote development environment. It's written in Go. So a dev box is a set of pods running in full isolation in a Kubernetes namespace. The environment has built-in support for functional tests. It also has full support for stacks, again, the same concept as in KWS. It also has support for playbooks, some sort of automation framework which can be used to automate away daily routine tasks of developers. So when you get yourself a new dev box, then you just run a single command to bring your dev box into a desired state. And you can do it over and over again, and you don't have to worry about that you're going to lose your automation somehow because it's already stored on the remote development environment platform. Again, service configuration for remote development environment is fully stored next to your source code. And again, the tool is like owned fully by one single team in terms of support, maintenance, and development. And the developer experience product manager owns the full vision, future, and challenges of that product. So this is the interface for remote development environment, a command line application, and a very typical flow if you want to start using dev boxes and then develop your microservices is just running 3 commands basically. Devbox new, this will request you a new dev box. Then you just change to your microservices repository to the root directory, and then you run devbox service develop, and magic will happen. If we have enough time, I'm going to demonstrate that flow in the end of this presentation. So what was the developer experience like after we released our new platform for development environment, remote development environment? So in December 2020, we started to measure wasted development hours. So it was at 2.56. The way we measure it is just conducting simple surveys. monitoring developers' gut feeling, how many hours they waste per week just to fight development environment issues. As you see, the trend is declining. We released dev boxes or the remote development environment in the beginning of this year. At the same time, or actually a bit earlier already, we started to fight with all the issues that we had with the local development environment, and we actually managed to bring wasted development hours down a bit. But after we released the dev boxes, the remote development environment for our developers, the drop has been even bigger. So since December, March, and May this year, so you already see that the drop has been quite significant. So that kind of trend actually gives us confidence that what we have achieved and done is a success. So that kind of declining trend line is a confirmation that we have done great work. Also, our developers' feedback actually confirms that we are going in the right direction. They like the installation process of the DevBox CLI. They are also happy with the performance of it, and they also like all the features that we have developed for our remote development environment. If you want to learn more, how does it look like exactly, then we have some articles on Medium. You can find Pipedrive's account on Medium, and we have 3 articles about our remote development environment and also about local development environment. So please go and check it out. We also have some YouTube videos there. You can see how does it look like. So now to the practical tips. So based on our experience and our company size, we are quite confident to give that kind of practical tips to help you understand and decide how to go forward if you should feel the pain with your development environments. Of course, these tips depend on many factors, especially on the company size. I would say that if you are working in a small company, then perhaps these tips really don't apply because you don't need it. But if you are a big enough company and you start feeling pain with development environments, then we really recommend you to think on these points. So first of all, treat your development environment or platform as a product. Introduce developer experienced product manager role, who would oversee the vision, the future, and all the challenges of the development environment. Feedback loops, implement effective feedback loops. Go and ask your developers what they are experiencing. Conduct surveys, do one-on-ones, and also do not forget to provide quick support if your developers should get in trouble with the development environment. This is really crucial. Measure wasted development hours, as I brought out earlier. Instrument your development platform. Collect logs, collect metrics, do counts, do durations. And based on these metrics, based on this instrumentation, build dashboarding, monitor the quality of your development platform. And last but not least, remote development tooling also works for locally. So if you don't want to go to AWS EKS, then you can also spin up Kubernetes cluster locally on your workstation. And all these tools that are today available for remote development, they can actually connect to the local Kubernetes cluster as well. So try it out, play with it, and later you can decide whether you want to go into cloud or not. And with these practical tips, I conclude my presentation. And I thank you very much. And now it's time for questions. And if...
Wait.
Thank you.
Maybe demo.
Do you want to see a demo? All right, let's try. But I need a bit of help. Nagi, can you come on stage? Nagi needs to hold my microphone because I can't type with one hand.
Sure. It's good to be hydrated.
So what you see on the screen is a microservice, and I'm going to run the same commands that you saw earlier on one of those slides. So I don't have any active dev boxes at the moment, so this is what the dev box status is telling me, and now I'm going to acquire one. So I acquired a new dev box, so the action was instantaneous. And now I'm going to run devbox service develop. And magic starts to happen. So some configuration files are read. And now the tool is deploying my microservice in a remote machine. File synchronization is initiated, and I already see the service logs in front of me. So this is a confirmation that my service has started up. So let's try to see if it actually responds as well. Yes, it does. So let's try to change the service, and let's see if the changes are synchronized to the remote machine. Something went wrong. So doing live demos is also very risky. Is always very risky. Oh, I'm in a wrong directory. So let's change the source file here. So let's delete, or let's comment it out. Let's delete it. Yes, you saw that one file was, you see that one file was uploaded because it was changed. Let's see if that endpoint is now gone. Yeah, cannot get blue violet. So the endpoint is gone. That just got deleted. Let's put it back. Let's save the file. Let's see if it gets synchronized to the remote machine. Yes, it was synchronized. And let's see again, once I reload it, if the endpoint responds. And yes, it does. So this is the very basic flow how we actually work with the platform. You make changes locally, and these changes get synchronized immediately to the remote machine. In addition, the platform also supports port forwarding. So this is what you actually see. I'm connecting to the service over localhost on port 3000. So everything goes through port forwarding to the remote machine. And it's the tool also supports debugging capabilities. So this is pretty much it, and thank you very much for your attention.
Yep, it's time for question.
Questions, yes.
Same deal. One question, pair of socks. I will give you a mic.
So hello, quick question. How many dev boxes can you run? Can it be like every developer gets one, like Monday morning, everyone comes in, wants a dev box. Do they get one? And second question right after that, how much does it cost to run them?
Thanks, very good question. So yes, it's possible to actually give every developer his or her own dev box. But what we have discovered is that we don't actually have to provide everyone their own dev box. At the moment, we run 140 dev boxes in parallel. So, and how much they cost? So the cost here is the way we see the cost here is that the benefits, the performance, and everything that we actually get from using that kind of platform outweigh the cost. So the wasted development hours that we saw earlier, this is a cost. This is a direct cost. So by reducing the amount of wasted developer hours, we actually save money, and we can use that money elsewhere. So we can invest that money into new employees or into new technology. This is the way how we see it. The cost? Yeah, sure, we know what the cost is, but I'm not going to tell you that.
One more question from here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you for amazing speech. It's like really looks like a magic for me. But my question is, how did you go to this decision even to go from the local development to like remote? What was the like break point when you said, okay, we need to go remote now?
The pain was just too big with the local development environment. And this was actually one of the biggest challenges to changing our mindset. We basically bet heavily on the local development environment, and we learned our lessons and started to actually look for alternatives. And one of the alternatives was to use a remote development environment. The idea wasn't actually new. It was already used in other companies. We just picked the idea up and actually implemented or tried it out ourselves as well. And based on the proof of concept, we saw very positive results and decided to go full on with the idea and actually packaged the idea into a real product. And today our developers are really, really happy.
Hi there. So my question is this open source, or is it, if not open source, at least available for other users?
Our own implementation isn't open sourced, but our implementation is based on dev space. There are actually many tools around Kubernetes that allow you to do remote development environment in Kubernetes. So our solution is based on dev space. There are other solutions like Octeto, Scaffold from big tech companies, to be honest. But yeah, our own solution is not open source because it's quite customized. We have some other commands there to support Pipedrive workflows like creating companies and TILs on Pipedrive application. So this is all compiled into the command line application, and it will be like useless for the outside world. So, but still, you can go and use dev space. So go check it out.
Cool. Thanks.
Do we have questions? No one has a question here. No one has questions here. Only here. No one has a question here.
Let's do one more question. Yeah.
I want to ask, you mentioned that you work in Pipedrive not very long. The question would be, how long you are working in Pipedrive, and are you happy in this position?
Yes, of course I'm happy. So I joined Pipedrive in November 2019. So it makes how much? 2 years and 8 months or something like that. And yes, so it was a big change for me because like I didn't like I haven't done DevOps before like in full scale before I joined Pipedrive. And once I joined Pipedrive, It was a new challenge for me, but I used my previous experience to actually deliver, and I'm really happy about the decision, and yeah, I like to work here. Thank you for the question. Good question.
Yeah. Non-HR question. Any?
Yeah, it's platform agnostic. Yeah, well, in Pipedrive, our services are mostly written in JavaScript or TypeScript running, and we are running these microservices in Node.js runtime environment. But some of the services are also implemented in Go, so they are both supported. But I don't see any reason why the tool couldn't like support other platforms. Yeah, different like development platforms have like different approaches. I mean, if you change the file changes from your workstation to the remote machine, the service needs to be restarted to pick up the changes. So there is some compile time involved, and on some platforms the compile time is a bit longer. Yeah, but I don't see like any reason why we couldn't use other platforms with that solution. You? True. But we haven't like seen any issues yet with that kind of thing. So the time it takes to get the change from your workstation to the remote machine is in sub-seconds basically, and the service in our case, in Pipedrive case, also restarts really fast. Yeah, that's the experience we have today. We haven't really measured it with other languages. Yeah, we have many microservices. We have around 700 microservices running in different environments. So
let's move on to the question.
Hello, I have a question. Is your solution somehow integrated with your internal service desk or ticketing system? I mean, how the entire workflow looks like if the particular developer wants to request a new sandbox, where does he start from?
No, it's not integrated. In that sense, the solution doesn't know anything about ticketing. So it's all on the developer's shoulders. So if they start to work on their tasks, so most probably they are going to create a feature branch on a repository. So it's a matter of naming it, etc., linking that feature branch with your tasks on issue tracker. So you can do that kind of thing, but the platform itself doesn't actually really care about it. So in that sense, yeah, it's not connected.
Let's do 3 more questions. Yeah?
You think so? Let's do it.
3 more.
I'm going to drink in the meantime, so go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I have 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned earlier when talking about Kubernetes workstation, the local dev environment, you mentioned that there were some issues with shared resources like databases and queues. Is it still the same with this remote environment? Is it like, is each dev box has its own databases and queues, or is it shared? And the second question is more from the platform side. So what kind of SLAs you are offering to the developers? Like, is this like highly available? Can it survive like an easy failure or something like that?
The answer to the first question is that it's in full isolation. There is no cross-usage of different services. No, not microservices and not infrastructure services as well, like databases and messaging services. So everything that you get with your dev box, you don't have to share it with others. So everything is isolated. So the second question about SLAs, the answer here is we have some SLAs. Like I can't like remember these figures by heart, but we try to keep the solution as highly available as possible. Yeah, this is our commitment, and we are actually tracking it. Thank you.
And 1 more question.
For monitoring the performance of the workstation, do you use Grafana, Prometheus with Grafana for monitoring the performance? What tool do you use to monitor the performance of the workstation?
You mean the solution for remote development environment?
Yes.
We send logs from the command line application directly to Greylog, for example, and we extract all the information from these logs on Grafana, on Greylog, and we visualize it via Grafana. Yes.
Firstly, I have a very simple question. Where could I watch the replay of the presentation afterwards?
YouTube. On YouTube, yeah. But on YouTube, the video is actually different. So you will see a lot more on YouTube. So just go and check it out.
Okay, perfect.
The stuff that I did here today was ad hoc. So I didn't actually plan it, but I still did it. So yeah.
Okay, and my second and real question is, how common is the use of dev boxes in big tech companies?
I don't know that.
I don't know that. Okay.
I mean, I can only give you some details about how popular it is in Pipedrive, but in other companies, well, just quite recently, I don't know, some months ago, we learned that GitHub, for example, basically struggled with same kind of problems, and they also introduced some kind of development platform environment where you can get a development environment in seconds, basically, and start coding right away. Yeah, so other big companies are actually kind of moving in the same direction. Yes, Microsoft bought it at one point, yes.
Thank you, Ragnar. Let's give a round of applause to Ragnar. Wait. There is something for you. And let's make a short break again before the last speech. Also, it's short one, please. 5 minutes.